Hello, everyone. Again, welcome to today's session with a somehow intimidating title, Death by Deployment. To give you a little bit of context why we chose to do this, as you can see on my slide, I have two exceptional gentlemen joining me in this session and share their knowledge and learnings from the last 3 years and more about this topic is that it pops up consistently in almost all new engagements that we have, that there seems to be a bottleneck, a crisis, war room as soon as it comes to deployment of software and especially a CDP. Why is that? Probably because used in the right way, it's kind of the heartbeat of many interactions from infra to marketing to, and by the end of the day, user experience, which you really don't want to disappoint by the end of the day. So we thought we put together this webinar, the format, just a little bit of how it will go down. We will start it quite easy, go into a discussion. I will guide or moderate this webinar with some questions. And by the end, we will leave 50 minutes of Q&A, 10, 15 minutes. Let's see how it goes, where we will try to answer as many questions if there are any, to be very honest. To myself, I'm Mitch, VP Partnerships at Zeotap CDP with the company for 3 years. I pretty much for the same time worked with Marco, who is with us today, and we went through quite a couple of implementations together. I'm not gonna lie, there were some hiccups, but I think we put together a lot of knowledge together how to make it, because at some point you will hit a brick wall in every implementation. Which mindset, which tools and which approaches you need to basically overcome this and doesn't let it be a fail. With that, I would hand over to Mark that will present himself with a little slide. Also, sorry, I forgot to mention this. The format is we decided not to have too many slides, which means we have 3, this and 2 more. Very unusual for a software company and a consultant company, but I thought the discussion is what makes it more interesting. So slide 1 you saw, slide 2, Marco, over to you when it clicks through. No, Zeotap, sorry.
It's Zeotap. I can also do this if you like.
You want to do that? You want to do that, Marco? No, it's okay. Thanks, Mitch, and thanks for the introduction. And very excited to be here, especially with our friend Marco, who's been our partner in crime in on many occasions. So, I mean, this is just a very quick slide about who Zeotap is. So Zeotap is the leading CDP in Europe, and you can read all the slides. You know, we're built for impact, deployment, flexibility, and real-time activation. Sure, why not? We work with the most iconic brands out there in Europe, people like Virgin Media, like Sky, like Entain, Douglas, Rewe, Carrefour, Bayern Munich, and many, many others. And we'll talk a lot about our approach to implementation and deployment in this. So I won't elaborate too further. I would just say that we are very excited to be here. That's it. That's from me, Marco.
Thank you very much, Elad. And now to Marco.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also really
happy. Stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I'm also very happy to be here and discuss this very interesting topic. Maybe also some words about digital. As Elad and Mitch already have mentioned that we are working closely together with Zeotap, of course, maybe also with other CDP vendors, but yeah, Zeotap is our most preferred partner, of course.
He tells that to everybody, you know that, Mitch.
Yeah, of course. What we are doing at Digital, we are providing on one hand, let's say, end-to-end solutions. So we are taking care of the full value chain of digital marketing. We are starting at ingesting the right data, then storing the right data, harmonize the data, apply ML or the new AI models to it, and afterwards activate the data, maybe via Zeotap across different kind of channels then afterwards. This is our service offering on one hand. We have around about 70 people on board to cover this. from data engineers over AI engineers up to data scientists and a lot of consultants as well. And the other big pillar we are taking care of is reselling. So if you are interested in a CDP solution, we also can take care of the cloud reselling business for you because we are also a partner there of Google Cloud, for example, and there's a specialization in marketing analytics. So we have a strong marketing analytics background. From my background, I started my career I'm getting old. 25 years ago, or more, 25 years ago as a typical engineer, software developer. So I still have this in my heart and combine this with all the marketing knowledge I gained through the last couple of years as working for the Omnicom for around 10 years and now working closely with Zeotap on CDP projects. And we always keep in mind that everything we are doing for clients should also have a business impact. And it's a lot of fun to do. Develop a lot of stuff, especially now with all the AI agents and vibe coding, but it always should have a business impact.
Cool. Thank you very much, guys, both of you. Sorry for the mix-up of the order. But anyway, let's start. Let's get a little bit warm in this discussion because I think we hear a lot. You can read every website of every vendor is telling you the seamless implementation, the turnkey sometimes. Why do you think it's still such a messy topic if everybody is claiming to figure it out? Why do you think this comes down as something that a lot of people, and I bet also some of the participants in this call here, have experienced as a really messy topic? Maybe Marco.
Yeah, that's a huge topic, to be honest. So where do we start? Now, there are a lot of CDP vendors out there, or so-called CDP vendors, which also say, oh, we have this nice PowerPoint slides and we can do this and that. But the truth is then later in the implementation itself. So we need someone who understands, let's say, the pros and cons of every CDP vendor, and also, let's say, understands the business itself. So this is also one of the biggest challenges for clients on their end, that sometimes no one is really responsible for customer data. Then you have the IT working against the marketing department. And the marketing would like to have a CDP, and the IT needs to implement it. Marketing would like to develop a lot of new and exciting use cases quite fast, but the IT is then always looking or focusing on governance, data strategy, how can we implement it into our legacy stack and stuff like that. And last but not least, one of the most important things, you need to take care of a robust foundation. You need to be sure about the use cases, prioritize the use cases. Don't start directly with a fancy AI use case. Just start with a simple use case where we can already prove the ROI of implementing a CDP solution. For example, with a cart abandonment or a suppression use case. And maybe there's also another topic, data privacy. There are a lot of discussions also where you need to directly involve from day one your legal team to make sure that you're always following their direction and tell them about the CDP project, and that is actually also an additional security layer on top of all the marketing activities. And maybe also the organization itself. So who is really responsible for the CDP? Because many different kind of departments need to work together in a CDP project and need also to be aligned. And this also leads back to one of my other points, responsibility. Now, who is really driving the CDP implementation itself? So basically, it's sometimes also, let's say, a mirror, which really reflects the organizational capabilities or structures of a company when you start with a CDP implementation.
I love that, the mirrors thing, because AI is easy to get through the door, but you need to be ready for this.
Is it?
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to say, do you want to add something to this?
I have many things to add, but first of all, let's kill the slides, because I think they don't serve a purpose anymore, right? So I think that will be good. And also, just to mention to everybody, we have, I think you need to stop sharing. Mitch, on your side.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Cool. And I will also say to everybody on the call that if you want to ask something, please use the Q&A because I don't know, something in the chat didn't work. So just sorry for that. We are not Zoom native. We're more of a Google Meet kind of people. So sorry for that, but please feel free to ask any questions on the Q&A. So I agree with, well, I wanted to say I disagree with everything Marcus said, but I don't actually agree with most of what Marcus said. Yeah, I know it would be like, it would just to create some, excitement. And,
Some friction here.
I
That's good.
disagree with everything, like that's it. No, I actually agree with most of what you said. For me, honestly, CDPs are by design sitting at a crossroad. And they're sitting on a crossroad between, first of all, between the infrastructure and data team, infrastructure like technology team, data teams, and the marketing customer teams. That's one. And then the second thing, within marketing, they're sitting on the crossroad between a lot of marketing teams, right? So it could be lifecycle marketing, could be paid media, could be retail media, could be the whole world. And when you try to implement software that sits on the crossroad, this is a problem. Like it's a natural problem, right? So it's just like how it is, right? So, and the reality is that's because there's a lot of stakeholders, as Marco mentioned, there's a lot of people trying to, how to say, too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing, right? So like that's for sure one of the things that is making this very, very difficult. And the second thing that makes, for me, and honestly, I think that's probably my number one thing that makes it is because people underestimate change management. And this is one of the most common problems in all enterprises in the world, which is like, we have a problem, why don't we buy a piece of software to solve the problem? Which is like, the worst case, we can always blame the software on a serious, or the implementation. Like on a more serious note, change management is a very complex process, and CDPs, by definition, require a meaningful change management in the way data is moving in the organization, the way data is ingested, digested, exported afterwards, and in how people run their marketing operation day to day. So, and that change management is usually, how do you say, a second-grade citizen in these processes, and then you see a lot of these processes just like collapsing because of that. But I mean, honestly, if we answer everything now, that's it. Like we can finish the webinar. So I think let's give it some more options. Right?
No, wonderful. I mean, Marco, please go.
But exactly what you have mentioned, Elad, this organizational change which needs to happen also during the CDP implementation, especially afterwards, to really utilize the CDP most effectively. We always see this in a CDP implementation projects when we do a kickoff. Suddenly there are, I don't know, 40 people in a room, like we have mentioned, the CRM team, the marketing team, retail media team, IT team, marketing technology team, the tech management team, the data analytics, and they start talking to each other, which is then great. And we always hear the points, oh, I never have talked about this. And new ideas also spins up, which also is nice. But you need to create this, let's say, perfect organizational setup to really utilize the capabilities of a CDP, especially later on when all the departments really can leverage the CDP capabilities on their own.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, by the way, one of the things I think people can take from Agile in this context is like for an example, when you do a refactoring of a system, sorry to bore you to death with I think everybody knows that the one thing you don't want to do when you refactor a system or when whatever you upgrade the version of Angular or whatever, pick your poison from the world of development. What you don't want to do while doing that is also adding more features. Because that's that's how the refactoring ends up being instead of a 3 months project becomes like a 2-year project and everybody hates each other and like it all collapses and all this kind of stuff, right? So, and in CDP land, when you start implementing CDP, it's like that's usually what happens. It's like, okay, let's now load all imaginable use cases that we've always ever dreamed about, put it all on a piece of paper, and let's try to make most of them live in the first 6 months, or build the infrastructure to allow all of them to be live in the first 6 months. And then, and so I think the lift and drop or the copy paste kind of approach for me, and we can talk about this when we talk a little bit about the deployment approaches. But the copy paste approach is a much better approach, as in like let's start with the use case that we have right now, like just to get some data running through the pipes, see that everything, at least the basics is starting, it's going okay, and that we can at least do what we were able to do before. Ideally a little bit better, but at least do what we were able to do before. And then we can do everything, right? So, and we can like dream and build roadmaps and do all this kind of thing. But in many cases, people almost start too ambitious because the promise, and I think this is, I mean, I stand with my guilty face on, and also my slightly need a haircut face on. That like in a lot of cases, CDPs tend to overpromise, right? So, and I said that as an industry, where there's like a lot of like when you go to a website again, Mitch I think mentioned this, like you have like whatever, how do you call it?
Seamless, turnkey.
Turnkey deployment, whatever, all these like beautiful promises of which really underestimate the complexities around this kind of stuff. And I think afterwards there's a lot of expectation mismanagement to do. So that's another thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also one of the key learnings. Start really simple with a simple use case you're already doing, get your first learnings on, and then create a very well structured use case roadmap. You can you will implement it. So this is a way better process than just starting directly with what do we say in German? Yeah, the eierlegende Wollmilchsau. So which a thing which can deliver everything. This is exactly what we have done for Douglas, for example. And we also started with a simple use case because they needed to run their paid media campaigns or ongoing paid media campaigns, and we just implemented the Zeotap SDK on the website to be able to retarget users. So
Yeah.
And also the banned card use case, very simple, but with a huge effect for them.
Yeah. Rich, I have a question for you. I mean, we start seeing some questions from the audience. I don't know how do you want to handle that? Do you want to handle that as we go?
I'm having a look at it. I would ask if possible to do it by the end, or we can. Yeah, I'm easy. How do you want to do it? You need to answer them, so it's the work is on you.
Let's go for it. I don't love the idea of people asking questions at 4:15 and getting answered at 4:50. Like poor Kevin is gonna be like, oh my God, like sitting in anticipation.
I'm gonna take. This is the beauty of an unscripted webinar. I'm very curious how Zoom.com is translating eierlegende Wollmilchsau. This is gonna be fun. But Kevin, do IT really needs to implement it? I would be interesting to hear about how to minimize IT resources required by using an integration layer controlled within martech teams.
Marco, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm just reading also the question again. Yes, let's describe it like this. It depends on the use case. As I've mentioned before, for Douglas, we just needed to implement the web SDK or JavaScript SDK on a website, and also deployed the mobile app SDK. So we were able to directly start implementing the first use cases with that. But of course, if you would like to ingest more data, for example, CRM data, offline sales, offline purchases and stuff like that, or maybe come up with your own ML models, then you definitely need to involve the IT. And this is also one of the biggest challenges. For example, there's this new topic, composable CDPs, right? And for that approach, you definitely need to have the right data structure, data models in place. And this is the biggest challenge then that there is no real data structure. No one knows exactly which data is residing. So this is a big challenge. And for that, yeah, of course, usually we also, when we start a CDP project, we're not only talking to the big stakeholders we have mentioned before, but also directly starting to discuss everything with the IT and create an overarching data catalog. Where is each data residing? Where is the data, the customer data? And what kind of identifiers do we have? What is the data quality? What is the frequency of the updates of data, and so on? So yeah, for IT should also be involved, definitely. But
yeah, I can.
Go.
Please, Ella, go.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I mean, it depends is probably the right answer in this context. I mean, what I don't know from Kevin, what size of company you're in, right? So really, for me, first of all, it depends on what size of company you're in, right? So I think in some companies there is a very stronghold on everything to do with connecting systems, like the API keys, etc., by IT. In some companies, not so much, right? So it really depends. If, for example, all of your API keys to everything, whatever your data warehouse, your CRM, etc., are all done, are all held by the IT team, then you'll need to involve them at some point. Otherwise you're not going to get the API keys. It will be difficult to actually connect the systems together. I do agree with you as an aspiration. And by the way, I think there's a nuance in the question, which is about like he's asking about like integration layer control by the martech team, which is an interesting concept. As in, I do agree with you that conceptually, you could build, like, and I've seen that in other companies as well, that you can build like almost like a middleware that is a little bit more owned by IT, and then that middleware actually interacts with a CDP. That could be a way to, let's say, avoid it, but it requires a lot of pre-prep and work done by IT or data science or data teams or whoever to actually maintain that integration layer. So I've actually seen that in a couple of companies, and that indeed will simplify a lot afterwards. Which, by the way, in a way, and Marco, tell me if you think I'm an idiot for saying this, but I think in a way, this architecture is kind of similar to the idea of uncomposable, which is basically in the world of composable, what you do is you actually organize everything in your data warehouse, and then once everything is organized, then you have very few connections actually required, and so there's a lot. It's minimizing the IT work in the CDP implementation process, but there's a lot of work to maintain this whole data warehouse thing, right? So it's a little bit of a kind of what do you mean by that question, Kevin, to your question? But for sure, I would recommend involving IT at least as on a need-to-know basis kind of stakeholder to avoid a situation where you get stuck. And I think one of the things, and Marco, I'm sure you can talk about that a lot, but one of the most painful things we see in implementation and deployments is when things like you want to implement something and then there aren't any resources available to do this, right? So, and this usually happens because you didn't align with IT in advance and you don't have a roadmap that you are signing off with IT that allows you to say, well, like here, that's what I'm planning to do in Q1, that's what I'm planning to do in Q2. And if you don't do that, then you're gonna, in all likelihood, gonna get stuck at some point during your implementation process, right? So, and we have to remember that in the implementation, we discussed this before this, Mark and I, as preparation for this. Implementation is a funny thing for CDPs, right? So there is like the first, like, let's say, I don't know, 2 to 3 to 4 months, which is like, that's the heavy lifting, the data strategy. And then there's a long process that could take 1 year, 2 years. And it's not 2 years it takes to implement. It's like 2 years to like add more and more use cases and enable it in more and more parts of the organization, right? So like that's natural evolution and a positive evolution. But if you don't plan that part in advance, then you're going to get stuck. And we see that a lot. And also from an implementation perspective, you don't take into consideration the limitations of the companies you work with. For example, if you try to make all the implementation happening on a Q4 and you're working with a retailer, good luck. They're going to tell you, well, sorry, we're very, very, very busy right now. So leave us alone. Let's talk in Q1 again, right? So this is the kind of stuff that you need to think about. I don't know if that answered the question.
Perfect. Kevin, I hope it answered your question. If not, please type in follow-ups and I will make sure to pick this up. Next one is Juan Carlos. From a budget and governance standpoint, who is the CDP owner? Marketing use the platform, but data ownership resides in other departments. Ella, do you want to go first on this one?
As
a funny one.
As the people who sell this software. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I would say that the common owner of this is IT. Common. This is due to how companies used to organize themselves. If you look at most, let's say, traditional or standard enterprises, technology as a cost center owns everything that is in technology, right? So, and there's this big budget of, which is, by the way, one of the biggest sicknesses that Marco mentioned earlier in terms of ROI, et cetera, but we'll talk about it in a minute. But in most cases, the IT is the owner of this big budget. And this is across all platforms, the cloud cost, everything is there. However, of course, the users are the marketing departments. Or let's say the customer-facing departments. So I would say in normal circumstances, it's owned the budget is owned by the IT team. Now, I have seen, and we have seen in a lot of cases, organization that you have like this transfer pricing, internal transfer pricing mechanism inside the company, where you say, no, well, IT owns it, but somebody has to sponsor it from their budget, right? So, and this is really depending on how your company runs budgeting, right? So if the belief is that for every IT investment, you have to have a commercial owner, then that's how it will work, right? So you'll have basically somebody from marketing raising their hand saying, I want to invest in a CDP because I believe this is good for the business. And they will then need to transfer pricing something into the IT department. One man's opinion, I think that's a better approach in life. I don't think the idea of having IT as the mega owner of this massive budget as a cost center is a healthy way of running an organization, because at the end of the day, then IT, all it does is it really disconnects strongly between the ROI for the business and cost management. We see that CDPs are in many cases charged by consumption, right? So the amount of data ingested into the platform. This creates a huge discrepancy between IT and marketing. Marketing wants more data because they want to enable more use cases. IT wants to minimize costs because they want to control costs. They're a cost center. And this is a good example of what can go wrong when the transfer pricing and the budgeting is not aligned in the company, right? So I think Marco, you mentioned this. I'm sure you've seen this before, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah? Also from a, let's say, budget perspective, the IT is responsible for, let's say, all the IT stack they have in-house. And there's sometimes also a big challenge that they understand what a CDP is. No? So it's not the Microsoft Dynamics. No, it's not a CRM system. For not only sometimes there are challenges regarding the budget. No? That is not crystal clear who owns the budget. It's just a cost center in the IT, or is there a sponsor from the marketing department. But also, let's say, from a data governance perspective, and because IT feels also always responsible through where is the data now? Where is the data residing? What kind of data are you storing there? How do we take care of the consent of a user? And also, what kind of data are we sending there? PII information, do we need to hash them before? There are also a lot of discussions with them about this data governance or data privacy topics as well.
Couldn't agree more. We lost you, Mitch?
No, you didn't lose me. I was just lost in this wave of information.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. And then there's one last one about deployment. And then afterwards, I would close the deployment talks and go maybe into a more practical, get some rubber on the road, as you would say. Chintan, hope I pronounce his name right. He's asking why there's a need for the deployment. If we have a SaaS solution, do you see challenges where people are forcing deployments? I'm not quite sure if I get this question to the fullest. Marco, Elad, can you elaborate on this, or should we?
I give what I think I understand from the question, and then Chintan, keep us honest on this. I think in an ideal world where you have a SaaS solution, it doesn't need to be deployed, right? So if I'm looking at this from the old time where people, I don't know, from Marco, he looks young, but he's not actually that young. He's younger, but not that young. I just look old, right? So it's easy. But historically, there was an era at the time where people had these things that they come and deploy. I don't know if you remember that era when people actually go and install things on your server. This was the era of on-premise land, and people would come every 6 months or a year to install, and things would go wrong and everything would collapse, and then they'll have to stay there for a couple of days and fix it. So there was an era of deployment that was, to Chintan's point, it was supposed to be over by SaaS, right? So SaaS was the era of cloud and no more deployments, and you don't need to deploy and version and all that kind of stuff. I think when we talk about deployment in this context, it's not so much about we need to deploy the software, as in the software is being deployed. It is a SaaS. You don't need to do anything. It's just like you open your screen one day and all the new features are there and everything is fine. I mean, this is an ideal scenario, of course. Sometimes it doesn't work, but anyway, that's how it should work. So there's no real deployment in that sense. But there is, of course, a deployment in the sense that when we talk about deployment, it's more like an implementation plan or an implementation project. So to like how to make use of this thing, right? So a CDP, because it's an infrastructure kind of solution, requires a lot of connectivity, a lot of thinking in terms of the data, like the data strategy, like how do you, like which data meshes well with which data, and a lot of setup in order to activate well. At the end of the thing, at the end of the, if you think of the history of CDPs, at the beginning it was really just like a pipe, right? So connecting, like moving data from one, like a reverse ETL, reverse ETL kind of thingy, right? So, and even for that, you need like to think, right? So because you need to, what are my data sources? What are my data destinations? How am I massaging the data in a way that is optimal for that? And all of that is what we define as deployment rather than the old school on-premise, here's a disk, now go into the server, place it in, hit play and see how it goes. I don't know, Marco, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's maybe coming also from, let's say, the communication of some vendors out there. No? They have nice PowerPoint presentation. Oh, this solution is just plug and play. Don't worry about it. This is a solution. They can easily implement. I don't know, BigQuery. It's already easily implemented on a website. But in some ways, yes, and then I totally agree. And it's not a solution where you need to install on a server, patch it with updates frequently. It's an already pre-built solution for you, but still you need to do implementation, implement the SDK, as I've mentioned before, on the website. And yeah, as also Elad, you have said, take care of the right data structures and the data model to be ingested into the CDP. So yeah, maybe it's coming from that point that everyone says, "Oh, it's just a plug and play solution. Don't worry." But then, yeah, that's also what we discussed at the beginning. No? Why CDP implementations have become messy in some ways.
Yeah.
That's there's also this huge overpromise of some CDP vendors, which say it's easily integratable. So no, just plug and play. Turn on your computer and it's there. But nah, there are some additional challenges.
But to give some hope in this context, if you don't mind, I mean, at the end of the day, CDPs, including Zeotap, including some other players in the market, are theoretically, you could use them yourself. It's not like you cannot use them by yourself, and you don't always have to bring Marco and his team, and you don't have to, or talk to me, or talk to my team, etc. It's not necessarily needed. The challenge is it's all about the complexity, right? So if you're I don't know, 100 people startup, and you have a very strong VP R&D who knows what to plug into where, you can do this, but you can absolutely do this by yourself, and it might take you a week. Really, I'm saying this open, like there's not a big deal around that. If you are 100, whatever, 50,000 people enterprise with a data privacy officer, with a CDO, with a CTO, and a CIO, and a CMO, and a CCO, and a lot of silos between the marketing teams, etc., then things get complicated. So the complexity, in essence, is not so much a function of the software. It's more of a complexity of like the complexity of the organization that you're in that requires. And so if, again, I don't know where Chintan is from, but if you're working in a 50 people startup, don't call Marco. You could call him. You can call him and you can call. He's a very nice guy. You can talk to him anyway. But I'm just saying it's not like it's not mandatory. Let's say it this way. It's more like we can help you think about this stuff. But when we are discussing these death by deployment, we're mostly talking about these like larger-ish companies where people are, struggling in deployment. I hope it helps clarify in that sense.
It also reminds me of our OMR masterclass we have done 3 years ago, I think so, where we really took a look under the hood of a CDP implementation. So we all took a real online startup where we implemented CDP, connected BigQuery to it, and everything was set up in, let's say, 3 to 4 days in the perfect world, right?
Yeah.
Where we have data from the website coming in, data from the data warehouse coming in, and can really directly start activating data. This is the absolute perfect world, no? But
yeah, I agree. But this was also from scratch, and there was not a 100-year history of company development that you need to unlock in this phase. Cool. There's another question from Nick that I really love, so I'm throwing it out, and I throw my script a bit out of the window. I hope you guys don't mind, because let's imagine a company facing the question of how to approach customer relationship management across all channels in the future, particularly regarding personalization or hyper-personalization. In your opinion, what are the first necessary steps to take in such a project? What do you think should be avoided at all costs? I really love this question because I think it goes to the end where we will end up and that's the web. And it's a really good question. If you want to read it once again, or I can read it again.
It's good. I'll jump in, Marco, and you can.
Yeah, of course.
If you don't mind.
Nick, we can also discuss this evening and our dinner extensively.
That's Nick.
Yeah. But yeah, Elad, how about you?
So first of all, really awesome question. Well done. I think, this is a really important question in the world that we live in today, right? So if I may interject and throw some buzzwords in like AI, we all understand, I think we all understand that the consumer behavior is going to change dramatically in the next couple of years, right? So, the way people interact with companies, interact with websites, if they will exist, who knows? Interact with companies and interact with each other is going to change dramatically. And I think you're already starting to see, even within Gemini and ChatGPT and Claude, like company apps that are already starting to query, and it's just a matter of time until some kind of consumer behavior is going to move into that space, right? So we understand that we are in a world that is really on the verge of disruption, right? So in the classic way of interacting with consumers, which was very much, let's say, website driven and email driven, and let's say mobile phone app driven, those things are going to be dramatically disrupted now with the rise of AI as another basically integration layers between humans and companies. And so for me, the one thing you need to take care of is your data. That's the obvious answer. The key thing you need to do is to give or to have a super powerful layer of data that is future ready from a context perspective to whatever comes in its way, right? So imagine a world where you have, 20% of a consumer of a company no longer interacts with the website, but everything goes through a chat, like a GPT of sorts. Let's say that's I don't think again, one man's opinion, I don't think 100% of users are going to start buying all of their stuff just on ChatGPT, but it's going to be a percentage. Let's say those 20% expect a behavior that is appropriate for the GPTs. And the GPTs, as you know, they're pretty awesome, right? So if you ever played with one, I hope you did by now, they're pretty awesome, and the users are expecting the GPT to know about them. I don't know if you've seen, I think Gemini recently launched this Gemini Pro on steroids thing, where you can connect your own Gmail and your own calendar, and then it starts giving you insights about your life, right? Which is it's okay. There's also a privacy scary thing. Today is the data privacy day, by the way. So happy data privacy day. But ignoring that for a second, it's an interesting world we're going into. And so my answer to your question, Nick, is really about having a very, very, very powerful layer of data that can be agent to agent ready, MCP ready, whatever is ready, so that when you are building out this new way of interacting with customers, you are ready for it. And it's really about having a strong CDP and having a very strong data strategy and identity resolution strategy, so that you get more and more and more context. Think about it I want the GPT to know that if I'm a Douglas, take the Douglas example, I want the GPT to know that I just bought a perfume in a store 3 weeks ago, so that it doesn't offer me the same perfume now, right? So because I want to be able to so all of this requires a very strong data layer. I don't know, Marco, that's my 2 cents, but I leave it with you.
No, I absolutely agree. Yeah? So the data foundation is one of the most important topics, let's say, to tackle all the use cases we have in mind right now, or to tackle all the future AI agent use cases you have in mind. So this is also when we see when we are talking to clients about AI agent, AI projects. No? They would like to do this and this and that, and the nice fancy use cases, but they have no real data foundation for that. There's no real context for the models to understand the customer behavior, for example. So absolutely agree. Take care of the right data foundation. What we usually do at CDP projects is, beside, of course, understanding the use cases and do use case workshops, talk to each stakeholder on the client side, is also setting up, we call it two-zone approach or dual-zone approach. Now, one is, for example, the data warehouse, or let's call it cloud infrastructure, where we already ingest first data, like data from the customers, from the CRM. Maybe you already have it. Otherwise, we can help you and build it and make it a little bit independent from the IT department. And then you can easily apply different kind of ML models to the first section, to the first zone. And the second zone is then, for example, Zeotap. So this is then the playground for the marketers. In both ways, or both zones are communicating bidirectional. So also the raw data from the CDP is also exported back into, for example, Google Cloud BigQuery. And then you can also use this on top of all the AI agents, because they have a lot of context and information about the user. So this is maybe a very future, look into the future for AI agents. But to sum it up, from my perspective, data foundation is very important. Then also look at the martech and IT infrastructure, so that this also fits, that the CDP fits well into it. And also, of course, the change management we have already discussed, and also use case development. We talked about this fancy use case right now about AI agents, but maybe also start simple there, what we have also mentioned before, to start simple with the first use cases, and also gain your first experiences, and also prove that the CDP implementation also increases the ROI, for example.
Yeah, I second that point, Marco. I know, I mean, again, Nick is alluding here to a very interesting use case, and he's also mentioning hyper-personalization, which I can address in 2 seconds. But for sure, and I think part of what we're trying to achieve in this extremely unstructured webinar is to also give them advice I'm saying it in the best way possible, is to give people a little bit of advice. I think this start simple is a very, very good, solid piece of advice, because in many cases, like especially large enterprises, you have so basic use cases that are so powerful from an ROI perspective that you can justify any future investment in like CDP for like the next 20 years by unlocking like 2 or 3 very simple use cases, right? So, and those are very powerful and usually not so difficult to implement. And so I think before you go into the hyper-personalization, super complex AI decisioning, blah, blah, blah thingy, start with the basic. If you're already done all the basics, then absolutely then, and again, have the data layer as robust as possible. And I think Marco mentioned this, I call it the distillery, right? So like this basically this process where data gets cleansed, stitched, and then go back to the data warehouse as a really elegant way of making sure that the organization keeps intact the most valuable and the most up-to-date and the most accurate information that they have about their customers. By the way, in the context of hyper-personalization, that's the key. At the end of the day, hyper-personalization is, I mean, apart from systems or software to do it on, it's a lot about what do you know about the user, right? So the more high-quality data that you have about users, the more your data science team can then build the machine learning-based models to actually say, oh, well, this user, I believe, will be best served by this, right? So all of this is about data quality, right? So eventually, if you have a lot of attributes with a lot of metadata on the attributes, and they're always on and they're always updated, then that's an awesome way to do all hyper-personalization. Everything else, the smoke and mirrors of AI is that it doesn't require context. And I think everybody you talk to, when you talk to people who actually understand how AI works, even LLMs, and they seem very, very smart, they need context. They always need context. And if they don't have context and don't have accurate context, they will just spit out random crap. And like, so, and like, that's where like having this very powerful data layer is very, very critical. I think we have another question.
Yeah, we have another question. And also looking at the time, I need to put out the German in me to get this interactive, not unstructured, interactive webinar going. So Tony is asking, if there's an existing data infrastructure with customer data available, a gold reporting layer for marketing could be requested. What benefit would a CDP have over a bespoke refinement with existing solutions? So I guess it's kind of the data warehouse is very, very structured. They
This
have
is
it
the
consolidated.
the build versus buy, the very basic build versus buy question, right? So why not just like have the engineering team maintain this? So first of all, I would say most engineers that I know are extremely bored by managing APIs. Like I think that's like if you ask an engineer, like a backend engineer, what is their night, or a data scientist for God, for God help you, what is the nightmare for them is to maintain an API connector, right? So this is like nobody likes this, and this is like again, if I go back to the very basic history of what CDPs do extremely well, is to take data from one system and put it in another system, and the way to do that is by maintaining a very long list of integrations with a lot of vendors, and day in, day out, they have like we have on our side, we have a very powerful, very strong integration team that's their day job, is to make sure that our integrations are run awesomely. And so, and if there's something that is changing in the API of a vendor, then you can just like give us a call and we'll just fix it. Unlike in a company, then you can just give a call to your data scientist and say, well, I have other priorities. Maybe let's do this in next quarter or 2 quarters from now, right? So the very basic answer to your question is like, again, this is a very classic build versus buy question, is like, do you have people in the company whose excited job description is to maintain integrations between your data warehouse and destination systems? If the answer is no, then you're likely going to have a pretty crappy experience when you're trying to move data from one place to another. That's one. The second thing I would say, and this is an important thing that people tend to miss on CDPs, is that everything to do with ID stitching and ID resolution is, how do you say, it's an art form on its own. And I think a lot of people tend to underestimate how complex this is. I have an example. I won't name names, but we have an example of a company that we started working with a couple of quarters ago, where, I mean, they've been trying to do ID resolution by themselves for about 2 years unsuccessfully, and then they came to us and started talking to us about this, and we've shown them within 3 months that like that's very doable. And it's because this is what, again, it's like, how do you say, everybody has a raison d'être, a reason for existence, right? So some of our teams, their reason for existence is because they really get excited about ID stitching, right? So which is like, some data scientists might do that and some might not. And we see a lot of cases of ID resolution and a lot of cases of ID stitching and anonymous to known and like this and like again, that's like what we do for a living. And ID resolution and ID stitching, I mean, should never be underestimated. This is the core of a successful customer data layer. Forget about customer data platforms. If you want to have a strong data layer, you have to know everything about Marco or about Elad or about Mitch. And if I don't know that Mitch writes his name a bit differently in a login of a different platform, and as a result of that, all of that data now gets lost because I didn't stitch it well, then I just lost half of the context I have about Mitch, right? So for me, those are the 2 points about like buy versus build. One is about like, do you have people excited about like maintaining integrations that nobody cares about, apart from the marketing teams? 1, and 2 is like, how good are you in ID resolution? If the answer is yes on both, build is okay. I haven't seen many companies that are very excited about this. I don't know, Marco, your 2 cents?
What I mentioned before, this two-zone approach is basically a combination of both, buy and build together. So you still have the opportunity to build your own data model when you're a very advanced company. But as you have mentioned, Elad, this is usually see only the implementation of a CDP, or maybe the interface is just maybe the tip of the iceberg. And the maintenance is under the water, the maintenance of all the APIs, coming up with the connections to all the activation platforms. When you look at this martech graph out there, how many martech companies are out there, and how you need to come up with pipelines and APIs to all the different kind of vendors, because the marketing team now would like to activate audiences to TikTok, for example. Oh, now I need to create a TikTok connector. Nice. No, but this is all the maintenance of a CDP is it's very complex and very annoying. Let's describe it like this: when Facebook APIs Facebook is changing their API again and again each week. Back in the days, I also needed to maintain this, and it was a horrible mess. User interface is also very important. We also see this. Some companies have started with creating their own CDP user interface based on Looker, for example, from Google. And it looks nice, or the first steps look nice, but then they get a lot more requests from the marketing teams. Oh, we would like to create a new audience block with and on or combination there. We would like to activate, we would like to build a real-time journey. Please, can you make this for us? No? This is also what we see at companies, that is also not an easy task. And they can really rely on a company like Zeotap, who is doing this for a lot of companies out there and have a lot of experience in building a really nice and robust an intuitive user interface. And also back to the question about, or to your point about ID resolution. Exactly, it's a very good point. When you ask, for example, a data engineer, where's the customer data? Then you shows you a table. Here, these are the customer records. Okay, nice. But we have also the cookies, on-site logins. We have mobile app users. We have data coming from offline stores and something. And then it gets really messy, because then you think in normalized tables and can really compete with, and you can really activate them in real time. And that's also a big challenge when we're talking about APIs or connectors. So yeah, there are a lot of things. So I would always try to combine both, so that you're really fast and can really rely on what a CDP vendor does best: the user interface, the connectors, the ID resolution. Consent is also very important. And then you can focus on what you know about your own business best. Maybe also creating ML models and enrich the information in the CDP, and utilize it afterwards in your activation campaigns.
Perfect. Maybe modularity is something you should look after when you look for a CDP, so you don't have this big monster that only operates in each other, but you can actually complement whatever you did. Build and buy is your approach. We can call it whatever, but it's exactly what it does, right?
Let's call it composable. No, just kidding. It's
it's
something else. I know.
Piece.
But actually, yeah, because composable is a wrong name for what the composable actually is, right? So I'm saying maybe we'll reuse. No, just kidding. Anyway.
No, look, one topic I want to get to maybe as the last one, and I would like to ask you to be like, oof, 3 minutes, no room for failure. We talked about this easy implementation, all this kind of things, and I think one topic that is touching it or defines it, it's kind of the framework you are using to implement a CDP. And we saw, I mean, we were a lot on whiteboard. It looks nice. You have a timeline with some blocks, and it looks all nice, but I do not believe, and I think you can shed some light, because we had these discussions every now and then on how to choose the right framework that meets companies' DNA, because none of them are the same. All of them are different. And maybe you can touch a best practice that we saw recently. And then this is the call to action for everybody that wants to get in touch, to go to one of our salespeople or Elad or myself or whoever to have a deeper discussion on this. Marco, frameworks. What do you think? How to approach this topic?
In 1 minute.
In 1 minute.
2 minutes.
Wow,
2 minutes.
Okay. So
elevator pitch.
It depends. No, there's no one-size-fits-all framework. As you have mentioned, Mitch, their companies are different. They have different kind of organizational structures. They have different kind of data models, especially different kind of IT infrastructures. So what we all usually start with from a framework perspective is really talk to the people, talk about use cases, talk to all the different kind of departments, and start with that to understand the use cases on one hand in a very detailed way, and also, of course, the IT infrastructure or marketing infrastructure in a very detailed way. And based on that, you can create, let's say, a custom model framework for the specific customer. So it's always quite a little bit different. So a one-size-fits-all model is not there. But let's say part of it, what we have achieved in the past, based on our experience, we can also always utilize for clients, of course. And you can also, of course, reach out to us as well, besides Mitch and team.
Of course, to all of us.
Absolutely, yes. In 10 seconds, reverse engineer from being able to have a live use case in 2 months. 2 months. Have a reverse engineer from 2 months backwards. What do you need? What are the minimum steps required in order to get to a live use case? Like that's what we do for a living, and I think Marco, we do that together in many cases. And there's a basic stuff that you have to do with everybody, and then afterwards, like you very laser focus on specific use cases. But you really have to put a timeline on it, and it has to be a very ambitious timeline to avoid boiling the ocean, going too deep, going too big. So I think that, like, for me, would be like the one tip in 1 second. But I think it's time to say goodbye.
Exactly. It's prioritization by use case, low-hanging fruits, and then the long ones. I agree with you. Cool. Guys, thank you very much. This was an interesting ride. First time on Zoom. I hope it's didn't show up that I never did it before on Zoom. Thank you very much for everybody that joined. Thank you very much for the questions. And there's another one. Arina, I'm gonna answer this. We are gonna make sure that you get an answer to this. We don't have time now. And then we will take the questions on the chat anyway, and once that we couldn't cover, we will answer. Thank you very much to spend the afternoon with us. It was fun. I enjoyed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Thanks, Marco.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mitch.
Nice evening.
Bye.